Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 32 of the Journey Running Podcast, where the goal is to help you run farther, fuel smarter, and develop character through trail and ultra running. I am your host, registered dietitian, coach, and ultra runner Stefan Schuster. As always, I'd like to use this moment as a reminder to folks that Journey Running is much more than just a podcast. It is also my running and nutrition coaching business. So if you or anyone you know is looking for a coach or a registered dietitian to work with to help you crush your goals in 2026, you can reach out to me directly via email at journeyrunningsllc@gmail.com or via my website, which is journeyruncoaching.com. Also, it would mean the world to me if you could take a moment to rate, subscribe, and review the show. These small actions, though they may seem trivial to some, they do go a really long way in helping more eyes and ears get on the Journey Running Podcast, and I really appreciate it. I also appreciate those of you who have already taken the time to do so. All right, so I got a few show notes for you guys this week. So I'm going to start out with an update from last week in case you missed it. So the first update I have is that if you are looking to work with a registered dietitian to talk about basically anything, including sports nutrition, but cost is a factor and you want to go through insurance, I want to let you know that I can do that now. I am not accepting insurance directly. I'm doing this through a website called Nourish, a company called Nourish. So think of Nourish as the nutrition version of BetterHelp. For those of you who are not familiar with BetterHelp, it is basically a platform that connects patients to online therapists. So Nourish does the same thing, but for dietitians. So if you'd like to see me through Nourish, I will put a link to my profile in the show notes of this podcast episode. There you can sign up to meet with me. If you do want to see me through Nourish, I do want to reiterate, please use my referral link because I do make more money through Nourish that way if you do so. Also, I want to note that if you do want to see me and schedule to see me through Nourish and through their website, if you don't see the availability that you like, please do reach out to me directly. Once again, my website or my email is journeyrunningsllc@gmail.com. I do have greater availability than just my availability on the Nourish site right now. On the Nourish calendar, I just don't really like how it works. I'm only available on Thursdays if you try and schedule me through there. But I do have more availability than just Thursdays. I can promise you that to meet with you. We will figure that out on case-by-case basis. Also, I do want to note that if you want to meet through insurance, there are greater rules and regulations, meaning that if you live in certain states that require additional licensure, I may or may not be able to meet with you. Again, reach out to me directly so we can figure out those details together on a case-by-case basis. For reference, the insurance companies, they don't care where I, as the provider, am based. They care about where you, the patient, is based. So that's why that's going to depend on, the person who's reaching out to me. On the bright side, most states, I can see individuals residing in most states. Next update is just a quick reminder to check out the YouTube channel. Last week I put up, or a little over a week ago, I put up the Leadville 100 race video from last year. I think it was a pretty good video. I didn't get a ton of footage at the end because I was just struggling, but I finally did get that YouTube video up, and I got a whole bunch of other races on the YouTube channel as well. I have videos from both my Moab 240s, the San Diego 100, the Mogia Monster 100, Never Summer 100K. There's a lot up there, and I also do put a video format version of the podcast on YouTube as well. So if you want to see myself or the Journey Running Podcast, all the guests, all their faces, you can go and watch the episodes on YouTube too. And let's see, I'm always working on stuff behind the scenes, so stay tuned. Trying to work on quite a few things for Journey Running right now. It's just everything takes longer than I want it to. And that's just life, I guess. All right, so for this episode, I'm going to be talking about my Jackpot 100 race report. We're going to be talking about race strategy for loop ultras, mental toughness, self-care, socializing during loop races, music, the power of music, I should say, and performance from, my first loop ultra, which was Jackpot. All right, so this is going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited to touch on everything from my experience at the Jackpot 100. Funny enough, I actually want to start out talking about my day before the Jackpot 100 because I actually want to, my hot take for this episode is that I want to normalize race, like day before race reports, because I feel like life is just so hectic. Sometimes getting to the starting line of especially like 100-mile ultra marathon is just, it's so hectic and stressful sometimes, and I feel like there's a lot of people out there with some kind of crazy stories about like getting to the starting line. I mean, I remember hearing one last year about a guy whose like car was on like fire, and then he ended up going to like the start line of the Mogia Monster 100 and he finished. Like, we need more pre-race race reports like that. I have a few of my own, I feel like, but my day before Jackpot was just one of those days. It was unique. It just felt like everything that could go wrong, like, went wrong, or most of the things that could go wrong went wrong. So I'm going to take like 10 minutes or so to start off this episode and just talk about like my pre-race race report, because, yeah, it was something. So basically, I signed up for Jackpot like, I think just over a month, maybe less than a month out from the race. And one of the things I was looking for in my like registration was I just wanted to get to Las Vegas as cheaply as possible. I wanted to just try and knock out another 100-miler this year for the hell of it. I had done Burrito League in January, and I logged over like 250 miles in January just doing Burrito League laps. And for those of you not familiar with Burrito League, check out the episode that we did with the Boulder Burrito League champs, Sean and Kelsey. That was a really great episode, and you'll learn more about the Burrito League there if this idea piques your interest. But yeah, I mean, I was logging like 20 to 30 miles like every Saturday for a few weeks doing that. So I felt like pretty prepared for Jackpot. It's not like I was out of shape and just like signed up and did it, but one of the things I was looking for was the cheapest flight that I could get to go to Vegas. And so the cheapest one I found was a 7 a.m. flight there, and it also came with a 9 o'clock flight back 2 days later because the race was on a Friday. So I flew there on a Thursday, got back on a Saturday. That did mean with the race starting at 8 a.m. and my flight back being at 9 a.m., I knew that I had to finish the race in under 24 hours to make it to the airport and get to my flight in time. So that was pretty funny. I don't recommend doing that, but if you're looking for some extra motivation to run fast, that is definitely one of the more unique strategies that I think I've come up with in my time as just a runner in general. But yeah, so basically I like started my day that Thursday at like waking up at like 3 a.m. to catch a 7 a.m. flight to Vegas because it was the cheapest one I could find. I think I paid like $240, and that included with Frontier like a checked bag. My checked bag was like more expensive than the flight, I think. So yeah. Luckily, the flight was like the only thing of my day that was uneventful. The flight was great. Got there early. I think I landed around like 8:30 or so with the time change. So I got to Vegas like super early. Now, what was problematic was like I had planned to spend my day basically like getting there early, and I figured I would go to like Target and pick up, any like nutrition products that I didn't want to put in my check bag. Like, I'm not going to put a bottle of maple syrup, which is what I like to fuel with during ultras, instead of gels. I was like, I'm just going to go pick up stuff like that at Target, and then like I'll go to the race site. And then I figured, I've got all day. I'll like read a book. I'll meet other runners. Like, it's Las Vegas in February. Maybe it'll be a little bit cool out, but I didn't think the weather would be too bad. And I was surely mistaken. It ended up being a 40-degree freezing cold, windy, raining day. Like 40-degree rain, I think, is the worst element that you can get other than wind. I think wind is probably the worst thing to run in, but like freezing cold rain is so much worse than snow. Just, it sucks. So anyways, I had to find a way to like basically just do something with my day outside of stay at the airport. But yeah, landed at like 8:30. And my day basically started, I was feeling great. Like, I got there at 8:30. I like start walking to baggage claim. And problem number one of the day was, waiting for my bags. And I go to the bathroom. I'm like, I might as well just like go do my thing while I'm waiting for the bags to come out. And, I'm sitting in the stall there and I sneeze. Not a big deal. I wasn't sick. I hadn't been sick in the day of or that day or leading up to that day. But I sneeze, and next thing you know, I like blow my nose and all this blood starts coming out. Just, I've had bloody noses just, I would say, less frequently as I get older. I mean, I turned 31 in like 2 weeks here, but I remember getting my nose cauterized twice in like elementary school. Like, to me, bloody noses are just kind of like a normal part of just being a person, unfortunately. But I don't get them that often anymore, and it was kind of annoying. But it was a pretty bad one, and I'm like sitting in this stall for like 15 minutes waiting for it to end. It's just out of nowhere. I don't even think I've had a nosebleed since that, and that was over. So we're coming up on like 2 months ago. Yeah, so had that happen, and basically, like after my nose stopped bleeding, for some reason, it was very weird. I like blew my nose, got the clot out. Sorry if that's gross, but for whatever reason, I ended up like super congested, and like after my nose stopped bleeding, my nose started running, and I was like super congested basically for the remainder of the entire day. It was a very weird experience, and just to like foreshadow a little bit, the morning of Jackpot, I was totally fine. I just had like an insane amount of congestion the day before for whatever reason. So I basically spent the whole day like trying to burn time and super congested. Like when I was at Target, I had to buy like one of those really large packs of tissues. It was very annoying and weird. Anyways, I got my bag at baggage claim eventually, and burned an hour on my phone at the airport, decided it was time to go to Target. So went to Target, like did all my like food shopping for the day. The customer service there was nice enough to watch my like suitcase for me. I just told them I was in town and didn't want to or I was on my way to my hotel and I didn't have anywhere to like store it for the moment. But it was kind of funny as I was like packing up all my stuff from Target. Like I'd basically purchased some like food for dinner that night. I brought like my camp stove with me in my suitcase. I was just gonna like heat up some couscous and canned chicken, and I bought some paprika for dinner. Just to like spice things up a little bit. And, obviously you got to have a Coors the night before your race just to take the edge off your nerves, your race day nerves. And so got all that stuff at Target, and that seemed to go smoothly. Customer service, of course, had to check my receipt as I was like packing all of these items into my suitcase and looking like I was a homeless person. Of course, though, the one thing that Target did not have was a fuel canister for my stove. So luckily, there was a Walmart not too far away, and I decided to start walking to it. So now I'm like in Las Vegas. It's pretty cold. It's like drizzling out on me. I'm like walking with my suitcase and backpack to like a Walmart, and I'm definitely looking like pretty homeless on the side of this road here. As I'm like going, I think it was just under a mile to like the Walmart. I was like, I think I looked at the Ubers. Now it was like maybe 15 or 20 bucks to go a mile, and I was like, fuck that. So I just walked it. Basically just walked over there. On the way there, I like stopped for a sandwich at like this store. This guy asked me all these questions about like what I was doing because I had my suitcase with me, and I was like, he was the sub shop owner, and I was like, I'm not homeless. I haven't checked into my hotel yet. Not that I had a hotel. I was camping. Just sounds better than like walking around with a suitcase telling people you're going to camp out. But yeah, it was funny. He asked what I was doing in town, and I told him I was there for a race, and he's like, oh, like what vehicle are you using? And I had never been asked like, what vehicle are you using before? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, oh, like what kind of car race is it? And I was like, oh, no, it's like a run. He's like, you said it was a 100-mile run? So that was an interesting experience. He seemed really enthused by and interested by the idea of like a 100-miler going on in his city. He like talked to me a little bit about like running the Las Vegas half marathon, which I think that takes place at night, which actually sounds pretty cool. Yeah, I don't know. He seemed really like enthusiastic, but I didn't really get the vibe that he was going to be picking up the sport of ultra running anytime soon. It kind of reminded me of like when I was younger and I read Dean Karnazes's book, Ultra Marathon Man. There's like that scene at the beginning of the book where like this guy's delivering a pizza to him on the side of the highway and like asks Dean like, it's like, what are you doing? And like, he's like, oh, I'm running like 200 miles to the beach or something. And the kid's like super fascinated, and Dean says something in his book along the lines of like, he seemed really interested, but I didn't get the vibe that he was going to be picking up the sport anytime soon. And I felt very similarly when I was in that sub shop with that guy. But yeah, that's funny. I've never been asked, what vehicle are you using? That's funny. Using my Ultra Lone Peaks, if that counts, which I use for everything. Note to self, don't use Lone Peaks for a concrete race in the future, though. Anyways, got my sub, went to Walmart. Walmart was not as nice as Target. So note to self, when I'm traveling, don't bring my suitcase into Walmart. The customer service agents there said, we're not supposed to watch that for you. Can you just put it in your grocery cart? So I'm walking around. I walked around Walmart. It must have been hilarious. Like if someone saw me, they totally thought I was homeless. Like I put my suitcase into the shopping cart, and I still had like a little backpack on my back, and I'm like walking around, and the only thing I needed to get there, since I just got to Target, was a fuel canister. Like I don't know how much more homeless you can look when you basically have your suitcase and a fuel canister sitting on top of the suitcase in your shopping cart. So yeah, that was definitely an experience, and it was still only like early afternoon at that point. So I walk out of Walmart, and it's still raining, and it's only supposed to get worse that afternoon. So I kind of just Googled like a coffee shop near me, and I found like this Vietnamese Thai, not Vietnamese Thai. It was a Vietnamese tea shop is what I meant to say. And so I went there and basically just like burned 2 hours like reading a book and texting my friends that it was just like a slog of a day. I really was looking forward to socializing and meeting people at race day check-in and like relaxing, maybe running a few miles at the park there to see what the course would be like, and instead just ended up trying to burn time and just felt kind of lonely and isolated, like walking around Walmarts and Targets looking homeless. So that was definitely an experience. And meanwhile, like I'm blowing my nose every like 5 to 10 minutes because for whatever reason I was just like super congested. And yeah, eventually I did Uber to the park, maybe at like 4:30 in the afternoon. I got there. One of the things that I was also stressed about was like the Jackpot website. It doesn't really talk about camping a whole lot. When you sign up to register for the race, they do have an option where you can like rent camping gear, specifically a tent. But there was like nowhere super clearly on the website or in any of the pre-race emails that talked about like camping extensively. So I started to wonder, like, is there actually spots for me to camp here, or is this just like a tent that they have set up for like the 48-hour runners that's just like a pop-up tent, not an actual like camping tent? So I really started to like wonder if my plan to camp there was even feasible. Luckily, when, as my Uber was like pulling into it's called Cornerstone Park in Henderson, Nevada. So it's like just south of like downtown Las Vegas, southeast of downtown Las Vegas. It was only like maybe 25 minutes from the airport in total. But yeah, as we're pulling in and I saw tents, I was super stoked to know that I, in fact, was going to be able to camp there. So if you're trying to camp there, you can do so. You'll probably get a nicer day than I had. But you should know from my experience that it is possible, very possible, that it'll be like cold and rainy and windy the day before or the day of your event. So be careful. I ended up with like a 30-degree night that night, and I was nice and cozy, tucked into my like sleeping bag and stuff in my tent, but like, it's not like the most ideal of conditions to camp in. Yeah, when I got to the race there, it was kind of like quiet there, honestly. Yeah, I mean, I like checked in. I spent some time making my drop bags. I got lucky that it wasn't like raining when I was like setting up my tent and stuff. And yeah, finally was able to like get organized, get my pre-race stuff out. Made myself a little drop bag. I went to the race check-in and asked them a few questions about like the layout of like, how will I know how many laps I've done? And if you're wondering the same thing, they basically have like a giant screen that's like right by the arch, basically, the Jackpot 100 arch, like where you call it the start finish, but like every time you cross the mat, it clocks like what your time is and how many laps you've done, and that information feeds to like this really giant screen that you won't miss it if you're running the race, and it'll tell you how many laps you've done. It was pretty accurate. There was like one time where I think a few people crossed the mat. I think they like lost internet connection or they had a tech issue. One of my laps didn't like clock. Luckily I noticed it and I told the person who was sitting there at the computer the next day. But yeah, I mean, I would say what that means 84 of my 85 laps clocked perfectly. And I don't know what happened. They seemed to figure it out and they filled in the info for like my missing lap. So yeah, that was all taken care of. But I was asking like the volunteers at the tent there about that the day before and just trying to get organized. You can basically throw, I should also know, you can basically throw, if you have like a drop bag, there's like a 200-ish meter straightaway, like after the arch where you can put your drop bags or anything you like want to have with you for the race, like basically just on like the side of the trail there. Not really trail, it's like an asphalt, like it's just like a really wide sidewalk for like 200 meters. And over there is where like all the crews are. And that's where like people are just like throwing their bags down and there's a lot of spectators and it's super energizing when you're going through that. But yeah, you can put your bags anywhere over there. I did want to note that for all of you because when I got there and, you know, I was there super early, so nobody had really like done that yet. And I thought to myself, if I put my bags here, like, is someone going to steal it? Or like, is this like a common thing? Like just nobody had really been there yet, but you can do so. What else? The day before the race, yeah, I basically, I cooked up some dinner on my camp stove. I made some couscous, some canned chicken, some paprika that I'd gotten from Target, and had that Coors just to take the edge off the night before the race. And, you know, it's funny, I like bit into my my couscous that I had made, and it was super spicy, and I was like, what is going on? And I realized when I took a closer look at the paprika that I had bought from Target that I had actually bought cayenne. And I was like, I cannot eat this for dinner and then have like spicy poop the next day during 100 milers. So I had to chuck that, and I was lucky that I bought an extra box of rice pilaf. So I ended up cooking that with some canned chicken and had that with like the spices that was in the box of rice pilaf. So overall, it was kind of just like a hectic day trying to figure out like how to spend my time. I just felt kind of like lonely, and it was like an awkward feeling looking homeless as you're like walking through Target and Walmart in a city that like you're not familiar with. And also like when things don't really go to plan or expectation, you know, like I said, I was really looking forward to just like enjoying my day, getting prepared for my race, like at the race site. And instead it ended up being like cold and rainy and windy and kind of just like super depressing outside. So there's, you know, and you add race nerves on top of that and things like buying cayenne instead of paprika, just like, and having a nosebleed in the morning and being congested all day. It just all kind of like added up, and was just not my favorite day before a race that I've ever had. But, you know, that kind of brings me to an interesting point, which is like one of the beautiful things about running ultra marathons is like once the gun goes off, it's just like you getting from point A to point B. And there's like, you know, you've already set up your drop bags, you've created your plan, like the aid station's there, like all you have to do is get from point A to point B, and that's it. Life is so much simpler when you're running an ultra, and that's really refreshing. I think, at least. I think it's a lot less stressful to spend your time running races than actually like preparing for them. So anyways, there's my little pre-race race recap for y'all. It was definitely a day. All right, let's get into the actual event. You know, I woke up the day of the Jackpot 100. I actually slept really well the night before. I slept for like 8 hours and slept super well. And yeah, woke up, wasn't congested anymore. I have no idea how that happened. It was one of the weirder experiences of, I don't even know if, I don't think I would call it being sick, but it was just a really weird experience. Being congested for like 12 hours and that was it. But yeah, I woke up feeling great, feeling super refreshed from like all that sleep. And yeah, I was excited. You know, I thought that running Jackpot was going to be fun for a variety of reasons. You know, I'd done the Burrito League. I met a lot of people during the Boulder Burrito League, and that was one of my favorite parts of it. So I was looking forward to socializing with people. I was looking forward to doing something new. You know, running a concrete loop, 85 loops, 100-mile course, and that was also flat was something I had never done before. I've never run a flat 100 before. Everything I've ever done, the 14 previous hundreds I'd completed before Jackpot were all mountain races. Like the quote unquote easiest courses I've done were like, like the San Diego 100, which is still really hard, and maybe the Zion 100, which was like 90 degrees that day, and that was kind of like a slog. Those are not necessarily easy courses. I'd never run something flat. I'd never run on, concrete, which is just like faster. My PR going into Jackpot was 23:17 at Western States, if that gives you an idea. So I was looking forward to PRing, but also, just like doing something totally new and out of my element. I had no idea really how I should pace myself at a race like this. Because I've done 100 milers, I've done 200 milers, it kind of feels like the amount of new experiences that I can have in this sport is kind of dwindling down. Like the only thing I haven't done now that I've done Jackpot is like a backyard ultra maybe. I've never done like a backyard ultra. I've never done kind of like an adventure race like the Barclays, which requires a lot more navigating. What else have I not done? Now I've done a loop race, but I was excited to be doing something new, and I was also a little upset because I was like, man, this takes out there's only a few new experiences that I can have, and now I'm doing one of them, and that means there's one less new experience I get to do. So I was pretty excited for Jackpot going into it because of that. The course itself, let's talk about that. So the course was, like I've said, it was 85 loops. That each loop was 1.17078 miles. So that's super specific because this is a USATF certified course, meaning world records can be set there. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, since many of you probably know Raj and Ashley were at this race running course and world records. 95% of each loop per the Jackpot website is asphalt and or concrete. And then there was 5% of the course, which was some dirt and gravel road. And that was more so on the south side of the park. Basically, just to give you guys all an idea of what the course was like, the race began kind of close to the camping area and a parking lot. And because the course is, if you do the math, the 1.17 miles, whatever per loop times 85 is 99.5 miles. So the course starts by the parking lots, and you run a half mile, you make a half mile U-turn, and then you end up on the actual course running the 85 loops. So you start in the parking lot, you just add a little half mile extra there. Basically when the race started, we did that, and then you run through the starting line arch, which signifies, that you've started the race and stuff, and you start doing your 85 loops. After you run through the arch, the course basically runs north along this concrete path that's that 200-meter straightaway where all the crews and spectators and stuff are. And that's also where you can put your drop bag. And that was an awesome area every single lap to run through because people were cheering you on, and they had signs and tents and food, and it was super inspiring to have so much support for 85 laps along that section. That was awesome as the race progressed. And then while you continue north, basically past all these spectators, then the course takes a short turn, and you go downhill a little bit. You cross a bridge and you run over the lake that the park basically is sprawled out around. The lake is called Railroad Lake, if anyone cares. Then after you cross that little bridge over the lake, the course makes a sharp turn, and you're running clockwise. So then you start running southeast. It's a slight downhill, and then an uphill again. And then after you do that, you basically make a U-turn that goes a really giant U-turn that goes around the east and then south part of the lake. And then once you hit the end of the U-turn, you're basically on this maybe 400-meter long straightaway that takes you back through the finish line / starting line arch that you're clocking your laps at. Overall, there's about 36 feet of gain and 36 feet of loss per loop, so it's not a lot. But, if you do the math, that comes out to be 3,000 feet of gain and 3,000 feet of loss over the course of 85 loops. And, it is enough to make you feel a difference when you're super deep into an ultra. Basically anything that's I think we all know how it feels to be at mile 80, the second year there, anything that's even remotely uphill, you start to walk. So it does make a little bit of a difference. Let's talk strategy for loop racing, though. Before the Jackpot 100, I had multiple friends tell me basically to prepare a strategy for the event. First was my friend Joel Gartenberg, who's been featured on the Journey Running podcast. He ran a 1951 on the longer version of the course, and his plan was, it's kind of funny. His plan was to run for 4 minutes and then walk for 20 seconds, basically for 420 intervals. So super funny, Joel. He said he did it for the meme, but he also said that it worked really well for him. Similarly, I have a friend, Anastasia, who she ran a 17-hour 100-miler. I can't remember if that was at Prairie Spirit or Tunnel Hill, but she told me to basically run for 8 minutes and then walk for 2 minutes at a time, totaling 10-minute intervals. And she told me that's what she did for her 17-hour 100. And when I had also I should say when I was doing Burrito League and we were doing our Burrito League laps, there was a section of the Burrito League segment in Boulder where most of us would walk for a short time so that we could just break things up, use different muscles. And I just felt like between my Burrito League experience and then, 2 friends who had run really well 100s, strong 100s, who didn't know each other telling me that I should have a similar walk-run strategy, it seemed like the consensus was to do something like that at Jackpot. I'll be honest, I listened to both of them, and I took their ideas into consideration, but I still decided to go into Jackpot without a specific plan. I kind of just wanted to see what the course would be like, and then make a plan on the fly. And that's actually what I did end up doing. So I ran by feel for pretty much the first 15, 20 miles. But after that, I quickly started to realize that running on concrete was going to be a lot more tiring than I expected for the duration of a 100-miler. So I developed a strategy for me where I started basically walking all of the small ascents on the course and then running everything that was flat and downhill. So there were essentially three very small inclines on the course. There was one on the far side of the lake. There was, of course, I think the steepest gradient was the little hill that went right back into the starting finish line chute. And then on the south side of the lake, there were some rollers. Sometimes I walked those, sometimes I ran them. It just depended how I was feeling each lap. But I was basically walking the longer, it was maybe 0.1 mile incline on the far side of the lake. And then I was walking the little incline through the start finish chute. And for me, I thought that worked well because it just helped to break things up, use different muscles. I also didn't like the idea of being a slave to a timer that was telling me to run or walk at certain intervals. I liked the idea of being able to control what I was doing when I wanted to. It was funny. I think Andy Glaze, he passed me on one of the small uphills that I was walking, and he was joking about me walking the uphills, and I countered to him that I was going to walk all 3,000 feet of accumulated gain on the course, which was pretty funny, but it was also true. I'm pretty sure I walked 95% of those 36 feet per gain of lap or whatever. I will say though, let's talk about mental toughness, because I think this kind of builds into the race strategy for a loop race. One of the hard parts of the strategy that I followed was that as the race progressed, particularly miles 70 onward, it became very mentally difficult, I think, to motivate myself to run, walk, run again. The amount of times I had to motivate myself to start running again took a pretty big mental toll out of my energy levels. In a mountain ultra, usually what a lot of people are trying to do is you see the next tree that's kind of far away and you're all right, I'm going to run to the next tree. And you run to the next tree and then you start walking, and then you see a rock and you're all right, I'm going to walk to that rock and then I'm going to start running. And then you do that, and then, the cycle continues. But the thing is, in a mountain ultra, the scenery changes that you're passing by. And, the duration that you're running and walking changes significantly depending on, what part of the course you're on. If you're on a 3-mile super steep climb at, the end of, I don't know, the Mogia Monster or something, you're going to be walking that whole thing, right? That's a lot of walking miles, but then maybe you hit a 3-mile running segment and you run most of that. at Jackpot, I was running and walking the same segments over and over and over again. And I feel like, that predictability was almost like painful because like at one point, for example, I started like compartmentalizing how much I had to run by saying to myself, all right, Stefan, there's 20 laps left. And if I'm running 3 segments of this loop and walking 3 segments of each loop, that means I need to run this next segment 20 times, right? Because we have, let's say we're on lap like 65, right? Like if we're on lap 65, we have 20 more to go. We're like, all right, here's the first one. This first segment, I got to run. Can I run this segment 20 more times? Yes. All right. Okay. So then I do it and I think to myself, okay, now I'm walking and I have to run that last segment 19 more times. But I have a running segment coming up. And once again, can I run this next little segment 20 more times? Yes. Okay. Time to summon the energy to run again. So basically when that cycle like repeats itself so many times over and over again, it kind of feels like you're on a hamster wheel with like no end in sight. And obviously the end eventually is in sight, but like mentally it's pretty taxing just to like have to stop, start so many times. And maybe someone's going to listen to this and be like, well, what's the point of stopping? Just run the whole time. I mean, that's certainly a possibility as well. What can I say? I was just trying to vary it up a little bit for myself. And I don't know, it's mentally challenging to run the whole time. So like pick your version of hard is what it comes down to, I guess. Okay, let's talk self-care. So I ran the Jackpot 100 solo and without a crew. So doing so at a loop race, I think, is a lot easier than at a mountain 100, but, it still requires you to be pretty in tune with how you're feeling and what your needs are. So at Jackpot, my fueling strategy is like pretty simple, I think. I consumed like maple syrup out of the soft flask. I carried and alternated between plain water, so maple syrup out of my soft flask for fuel, and then I carried and alternated between like plain water and my I carried a water bottle, in my waist belt. I was using a naked waist belt. So basically alternated between plain water and then Tailwind. I was using my own electrolytes, which was the double Tailwind packets, which are 630 milligrams of sodium and 200 calories of basically all sugar. So, yeah, I did that for like most of the race up until like mile 70-ish. I think I just took like a few Oreos and chips from the aid station, but not a whole lot more up until that point. After the sunset, I did start like adding ramen into my diet. For some reason, the aid station, they didn't have like ramen ready there. Like they had it accessible, but they like didn't cook it in a large pot for, I don't know why. Like, don't ask me. Instead, basically I had to like start ordering my ramen like a lap before it would be ready and then pick it up the following lap. But then when I would like pick up my ramen, it was like so hot to eat, I would basically like walk it over to where my drop bag was. And then because it was so hot, I would like go run a lap in the meantime while I was waiting for it to cool off. So that meant like it would take me 3 laps to basically like order my ramen. So on like one lap, I would place my order for ramen. On the next lap, I would pick it up and move it to my drop bag. And then on the third lap, I would actually finally eat it. The reason I did it that way was because to me, I felt like it was important to stay consistent during the race. And I bring this up while we're talking about like self-care because, during the race, I felt like consistency was something that was super important. I didn't really want to have like a 20-minute mile where I was doing all 3 of those things at once and like ordering my ramen, waiting for it, like, and then waiting for it to cool down and then eating it. To me, that seemed like a poor use of time. So during the race, I made a rule for myself, which was that I was going to try and not complete more than 1 non-running task per lap in order to stay consistent. So that meant on like a given lap, I had the option to order ramen, move it to my drop bag, eat ramen, use the restroom, and or like pick up or like drop some other item or like fueling gear off at my drop bag little aid station. So, it's just interesting how like we can get kind of creative when we're late in a race to, just like make rules, subjective rules that don't really matter. But it's just interesting, like what we can think of like late in a race to be creative for ourselves when we're like striving for something. I just thought that was like interesting. I would have never thought of a rule like that if I was not like in the middle of an ultra. But yeah, I thought my strategy worked well, and it forced me to be like very intentional in those last 30 miles about like the decisions that I was making. And going forward, I might actually like take this rule with me into other ultra marathons. When you think about it, like an 18 or 20-minute lap where you're doing multiple tasks, like that's pretty slow, especially in like a flat loop race. I feel like, even if you like do that and then you end up super energized and you run like a 12-minute mile, like that's like 30 minutes for 2 miles. Whereas like maybe if you're just like trying to do one task per lap, maybe you can log 14-minute miles, and then instead you're at like 28 minutes for those 2 miles instead of 30 minutes. That's just how I viewed it. You don't have to, use this advice on your own, but I kind of just like the idea of trying to do one non-running task per lap maximum. And yeah, it worked for me. All right, let's talk surface texture. So I've mentioned this before in this episode. The Jackpot 100 was like my first time running a race on concrete and asphalt for pretty much the whole race. And, everyone who's running ultra, how unforgiving concrete and asphalt are as surfaces to run on, because, I can think of like my own experiences, like at like Never Summer 100K when I was running that. Like there's no concrete in that race until you basically like run through the parking lot super quickly on the way to the finish line. And like that like 10 seconds where you're on concrete, I just remember being like, wow, like this is so much harder on my body than like all the trail running I've done today. Or like when you hit the bike path at the end of the Moab 240, or at like Bighorn when you hit the road at like the end of the race, or a Mogollon Monster, you also hit a road at the end, and so on. Like I think all of us have experienced this before, and we all know like how painful concrete is to run on. Yeah. I think all those memories just say the same thing, which is concrete hurts, especially late in a race. And, I knew that going into Jackpot. I knew that was going to be a new challenge, but after doing like over 250 miles on pretty much all concrete at the Burrito League in Boulder here, like I expected the pain to start more so in like the second half of the race. I thought I was like as well trained for concrete as I could be. But for me, like my issues started at like mile 30. So like miles 30 to 45-ish for me were like the lowest points of my Jackpot 100 experience. A lot of those feelings of, that brought a lot of feeling of like desperation, I think, because, when you're struggling that early in an ultra, it really just like fucks with your mind. It's one thing to be struggling on mile 70 or 80 because you think to yourself like, well, I expected this. Like, this is mile 70 or 80, but when you're starting to hurt at mile 30, you start wondering, like, if this is how I feel now, how am I going to feel at mile 90? If Jackpot took place in Colorado, like, I might have dropped out at mile 40 just because I was like, this is going to be terrible, like, later on in the race. But because I was in Nevada and I had a flight scheduled home the next day, I was like, what am I going to do? Like, be bored of my tent? I might as well just like keep logging my laps. And so just kind of trudged on forward. And surprisingly, like most ultras, like I did start to feel a lot better around like mile 47-ish. And actually I started like a 2-hour-long phone call with my friend Joel at that point, which helped me pass the time. During that phone call, I logged like 10 miles just like chatting with him, and that really helped to motivate me. So thank you, Joel, if you are listening to this. And then after like that phone call, like, so that phone call took me from like mile 47 to mile like 57. And yeah, from like mile 50 or like 60-ish after that phone call to like mile 70, I was on like a super big runner's high, and my legs started to feel a lot better even than they did at mile 30. So it's amazing how things can change during a race. When you think that like your lows are going to last forever, like, yeah, they don't. And sometimes we need to just keep relearning the lessons that we already know. With that said, I'm not really sure if I'm going to run a concrete race again. Time will tell. One thing I will not do is I will not be running a concrete race in Lone Peaks again. Actually, that's not true. I will run a concrete race again because I do want to do Spartathlon, but I don't know if I'll do a concrete loop race again. We'll see. But I'm not going to wear Lone Peaks. I will be smarter and choose something with a little bit more cushion. That probably did not help how my feet were feeling. I probably should have used like a step up, like the Timps or something. But I don't know. I hadn't run them before. I didn't want to buy something new just for Jackpot. I wanted to stick with what I knew, which was like smart. But I don't know. I also like run with my feet, my toes kind of like point up when I'm running. And for whatever reason, maybe it was just the fact that this race was so much more runnable than anything else I've ever done. But like I ended up with a blister underneath like my big right foot toenail. And yeah, that just like pretty much hurt like hell after the race was over. So that was also frustrating. I'm not really sure how to prevent that in the future during like a flat race, but I will have to figure that out. So next subject that I want to talk about is socializing, especially at these like loop ultras. So there were a lot of like amazing people on the Jackpot course. The first person I ran with was Andy Glaze for most of the first like 7 or 8 miles. It's kind of funny because we've now met at races in California, Utah, Colorado. Yeah, we met at like San Diego 100, Moab 240, Leadville twice. Once when I was running and once when I was not. So yeah, and now at Jackpot in Nevada. So it's kind of funny because even though we'd like seen each other a bunch of times, we never really like shared miles until finally at Jackpot. So that was pretty nice to finally do so. He's a really cool guy. I just started reading his book, by the way. Smile or You're Doing It Wrong. Shout out to Andy. I mean, I'm only like 50 pages in, but it's been really fascinating read so far. So check that out if you're looking for something interesting. We were talking about like mental health. He's been posting a lot lately about his recent bouts of like PTSD from being a firefighter. We talked about like crewing, pacing, running Badwater. We talked a little bit about the events we're doing later this year together. So I think I'll see him at like Crazy Mountain and Leadville. But yeah, hopefully he'll be on the podcast at some point. We don't have a date scheduled yet for that, but we were chatting about that briefly. So hopefully that will happen at some point within, I don't know, in the near future. We'll see. He's a busy guy. But yeah, it was cool to finally like meet him. But yeah, I think he only finished like a half hour behind me. So like after we ran that first like 7 or 8 miles together, we must have been running like almost identical paces for most of the race because I only saw him one other time during the entire event. Like it got to the point where I was wondering if he was even still like on the course running because yeah, we must have just been going like the same pace, just on opposite sides of the lake for most of the race. Yeah. The next person I met who I really enjoyed talking to was Jim Ingalls. We only talked for like a short time. I wish we could have talked more, but he was a fascinating guy. He started talking to me because I was wearing my Bear 100 shirt. And, he's 81 years old and he was running the 100-miler there. And he told me that he had run an ultra in every state. And he said there were only 5 other people who have done so. And I believe that stat. I'm not sure where he got it from, but I don't think there's probably many people who have ever done that. So, he's the kind of guy who I like love to talk to because I have a goal of running preferably a 100-miler in every state. But if I can't do that by the time my ultra running career is over, hopefully like 60 years from now, I would love to run at minimum an ultra in every state. So I wish we could have talked more. We were going different paces. As you could imagine, he was 81. I think one of our conversations got cut off because he like walked over to his crew, and he's super old school, man. Unsurprisingly, he like stepped on a scale, and I guess he was using his weight as like one of like the defining measurements to like how well he was hydrating and like staying nourished, fueling himself. Yeah, and he also pointed out this guy to me who had run like over 2,000 singular marathons. I guess it was a friend of Jim's. I thought that was a crazy statistic. That also brings me to the next person I met was Ed, the Jester Eddinghausen, who he was on course running his 307th 100-plus miler, which is just an absurd stat. I mean, that is the kind of statistic you read about as like when you're a kid and you're reading those tall tale tales. Like it almost is too amazing to be true. Of course, Ed was wearing his Jester costume and suit and everything. It was super cool to meet him. I slowed down to walk with him for a minute and his pacer just because I was like, I can't not say hi to this guy. He started talking to me about his ultra running career. He asked me how many hundreds I'd done. And he was like, well, you could still do what I'm doing. He told me he started at 46 and ran 307 100-plus milers and he's only 63 now. So you know, I personally, I don't plan on going after his record, but, I do think it'd be cool to join the 100 milers club by the time I retire from ultra running, hopefully many, many years from now. Yeah, what else? Ed talked to me about running Badwater, and like he said he ran Badwater in a white version of his Jester costume. So that was that's crazy, man. He's a really nice and cool guy though, and I appreciated him taking a moment to get a selfie with me. Yeah, there were also, the other person I met was Rory Moynihan, otherwise known as Trail Gangstas. If you don't follow Rory or Trail Gangstas on Instagram, you should do so. He's a like rapper slash meme creator for ultra running. I love Rory. He's hilarious. The content he puts up on social always puts a smile on my face. And he's also a really fast and impressive athlete. He was actually running the 100 miler. I don't think he was purposely trying to finish. I think he was just there trying to get a long run in to prepare for something else. He basically ended up pacing Raj for the first 40 miles-ish of his race. With that said, a few people who were there who I did not get to chat with because they were too fast was Raj Palpanu. So Raj and Ashley Paulson. They were on course running world records and course records. So Ashley specifically, she set a world record for the fastest female to ever run 100 miles. She finished in 12 hours and 19 minutes. So once again, that was a world record and a course record. And man, every lap, basically either Raj or Ashley were passing me. It was wild. At the beginning, it was like, wow, these guys are fast. But as like the race progressed, it was like, holy shit, the fact that they're like maintaining the same pace it feels like that they started with was just incredible to witness. Raj, he didn't set a world record, but he set a course record there. He finished in 11 hours and 38 minutes, which is, wow. My hat goes off to them. It's super impressive. The other person who was there who I did not get to chat with, maybe I'll regret this one day, but Ann Trayson, she was there participating in the 48-hour event with basically like a pimped out walker. My understanding, I think I'm right on this, but my understanding is she's been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. So obviously she's not the same runner she was when she won Western States 14 times and Leadville 4 times. But she also held the Leadville course record for 31 years until Ann Flower broke her record just last year. So she was an amazing runner, and it was really cool and inspiring to see her on course doing what she could. She was running the 48-hour event and logged 71 miles during it. So that was super cool to witness. And every time you passed her, she was super enthusiastic, super optimistic. She was always cheering people on. She was always either cheering you on or on the phone with friends, always smiling. She also would switch between different hats, including a jester hat, which I assume Ed had given her at some point. But yeah, she was, and her walker was pimped out with bright lights. So at night you could always see her when you were running around the lake. Yeah, super cool. A lot of great people on that course. All right, next topic is the power of music. I don't typically like to listen to music when I'm running ultras. If this statistic gives you an idea of what I mean by that, when I ran my first Moab 240 in 2021, I finished in 104 hours, and of that 104 hours, I only listened to 2 hours of music. I listened to Dark Side of the Moon, and then I threw on I think the Eagles for about an hour during the race. So that was less than 2 hours of music in a 104-hour event. For comparison, I listened to something like 9 or 10 hours of music during Jackpot, which was obviously a much shorter event. I went through a 4-hour playlist that I curated for the event twice, plus partially for a third time. The reason I listened to so much music during Jackpot was, for a few reasons, but mostly because I got kind of bored on the course kind of quickly. I thought I was going to have more fun at Jackpot because I really enjoyed Burrito League and socializing at Burrito League, but despite the large crowd of runners at the start, there were really only a few people who were running the same pace that I wanted to maintain. Not that I was super numbers oriented. I didn't have a super specific plan going into Jackpot, but for pace and stuff. But I don't know. I was just running by feel, and I felt like I just felt like there weren't like a lot of people who were going the exact same pace as me. Some people were faster, most were slower. I noticed there were a lot of people at an event like this, kind of just like, especially in the 48 hour, just trying to see how far they could go and reserving their energy. I'll also say like the loop, it required a lot of mental fortitude, which I already talked about. But because of that and like the little bit of extra focus that it took to like make sure I was on top of, my self-care routine and making sure that I was like walking and running and doing like a good mix of that. I was just like trying to stay focused, and I found that listening to music there helped me stay motivated and focused when I was like struggling to do that on my own. I also thought that, music helped me cope with like a lot of the emotions I was feeling about like life and society today. Take it as you will, but the first few months of 2026, I think, brought about a lot of stress and anger from like the news and stuff that's happening in our country and around the world. So I think my playlist reflected that, as it consisted of a lot of Rage Against the Machine, Limp Bizkit, Tool, Rise Against, Linkin Park, Green Day, Smashing Pumpkins, Foo Fighters. And although I guess they're not really the same genre as the other band, but the Blue Stones, which are more just like general rock and roll. But I was listening to a lot of them lately, so I use that music and my frustration with society to, I guess you could say, turn anger into performance. So take that as you will. But yeah, I felt like it was a good thing, and being able to channel my energy into something, from something negative into something positive was powerful, and I think a lot of people do that. But yeah, I mean, I listen to music for pretty much miles like 20 to 45, and then again from like, pretty much miles 60 all the way until the end of the race. So I spent like, a lot of the race just like listening to tunes and getting myself pumped up. All right. So last up to talk about is performance. So going into Jackpot, I had 4 goals, mostly 3, but the fourth one was kind of, in my opinion, ridiculous. The first one was to run a sub 20 hour 100 miler. I thought that was very doable, considering I ran 23:17 at Western, 23:45 at Leadville, and I had not run a flat course in my life before, so I thought sub 20 was super doable in my head going into it. My second goal was to qualify for Spartathlon with a sub 21 hour time. I had already qualified for Spartathlon at Western States, but I thought it would be good to, re-qualify. Why not? I think I still actually should have looked this up before I recorded this, but because I ran Western in 2025 and Jackpot in 2026, I need to double check if that means I qualified for Spartathlon for 2028. Because my Western States time qualified me for Spartathlon for 2026 and 7. But now I'm not sure if I'm also qualified for 2028. It'd be nice just to have a few more, have another option for when I decide to apply to that race. My third goal was to run a 100-mile PR. That was my worst case scenario. So just wanted to run faster than 23:17, which is what I ran at Western. So top 3 goals were sub 20, sub 21, and then sub 23:17. That's how I viewed it. My fourth goal was kind of ridiculous. It was to try and run sub 17 hours. That was mostly like a byproduct of my friend Anastasia, who told me she thought I could do it. I was very skeptical, but she seemed like so confident that in the back of my head, I was like, all right, like, although I don't have like a super specific plan coming into this race, like let's start off at like a 4 hours. I broke the race into quarters. So I was like, let me start the first 25 miles in 4 hours and try and maintain that and run the first 50 in 8 hours. And if I can do that, like maybe I could go sub 17. And also I should note that if you run a 16:45, which is 25% faster than the 21-hour requirement for Spartathlon, then you can guarantee yourself an automatic entry instead of just a qualifier. So, running sub 21 hours, that just qualifies you for the lottery. But if you run 25% better than that, which would be 16:45, my understanding is that you get an automatic berth into the race when you apply. I didn't think that was possible, but I was like, you know what? Like, I'll keep that in the back of my mind. That didn't happen. When I started the race, I purposefully began at like that 4 hour, 25 mile pace. I came through that first 25 miles in, 4 hours and 4 minutes. So I was like pretty much on the dot for that like initial plan. But yeah, after that, I knew like running sub 17 was not going to be possible. There's just the harsh concrete was hurting my feet and my legs, and I began walking like the short ascents on the course like more frequently after that. So like it was fine with me that my ridiculous goal for the day was not going to be within reach. I should say like maybe 16:45 is like possible for me down the road now that I've done a loop concrete flat course like this. Like I have a much better understanding of like how I'm going to feel and what it's like out there. I also didn't do like any speed work or like really periodized training coming into Jackpot 100. Like I signed up for it 4 weeks in advance, and I was in good shape from Burrito League, but I had done like no speed work going into it. Like if I really want to try and run that time, maybe it's possible one day, but I would need to work much harder in training. So no matter how I did at this race, like there was always going to be room for improvement just based off of like my training going into it. But yeah, as the race progressed, I think I mentioned this already. I struggled a lot from like miles 30 to 45, 47-ish. My focus just became consistency and like trying to make the most out of what I felt like were not great miles. One of the things I always tell myself when I'm struggling is that like you can't win an ultra in 1 mile, but you can lose it in one. So, I just tried my best to do a good job, like remaining focused, fueling, controlling what I could, using music to my advantage. And I figured like if I can turn these bad miles or what feel like bad miles into okay miles in terms of like a time, then that's that'll go like a long way in what my end result of this race is. And, my first 25 miles were completed in 4 hours and 4 minutes. And even though I struggled a lot from miles like 25 to 50, I ran that second quarter of the race in 4 hours and 36 minutes. So still not too bad, considering how I was feeling for a lot of those miles. I came through the halfway mark. If you look at the tracker on the Jackpot website, we'll call it the halfway mark, 49.9, so close. Came through there in 8 hours and 40 minutes. That gave me a lot of confidence to, run at least like sub 20 hours, even though sub 17, which was a ridiculous goal. Even though that was kind of ridiculous, I still felt like coming through an 840, I felt like I could run sub 20 for the second half. I just thought about my second half of Western States, which was much harder. I ran that in 12 hours and 57 minutes. And, I felt like running, if I had to run sub 11:20 for the second half of Jackpot, I felt like doing that on a flat course where there's not 2 more canyons of Western States, not a river crossing, and not 100-degree heat, and not as much vertical as Western to deal with. I felt like 11:20 was very possible if I ran 12:57 for the second half of Western. And then I got into a pretty good groove from like miles 50 to 75, which were spent like pretty much a good chunk of those miles were spent on the phone with my friend Joel. And then I got like a really intense runner's high from miles like 60 to 70-ish. And I completed that quarter of the race, and I still slowed down to a 5:23, which is pretty normal, like as you get deeper into an event. But I didn't slow down by like too much. So my time at mile 75.2 was 14 hours and 3 minutes. And I felt really confident at that point that I could run the last 25 miles of the race in, that would have been a 5 hours and 57 minutes to finish sub 20. But I also did have my friend Joel's time of 1951 in my mind. So that was really like that was my A goal at that point. It was to try and beat my friend. And then the last quarter of the race, it was a little slower. I had more responsibilities to take care of myself, as we all do, from mile 75 to 100 of an ultra. I had to do that thing where I was like ordering and then moving and then consuming my ramen multiple times in that like last 25 miles of the race to stay energized. I stopped at like 2 different points to pick up some Red Bulls and like chug those while I was walking. Actually had to take a dump like twice, I think, in the last 25 miles, urinate more frequently because of like the broth from the ramen and, the Red Bulls and stuff. I also had to stop to put on a jacket since the temperatures dipped into like the high 30s. There was just a lot more like responsibilities, but I thought I did a really good job taking care of myself, especially like without a crew. And, I still, my split for the last 25 miles was 5:34, which was only 11 minutes off of my splits from mile 50 to 75. So I was pretty happy with that. Despite the added responsibilities and colder temperatures, I just felt really good about that last 25 miles. And then I came through in a time of 19 hours and 37 minutes, which was a 100-mile PR for me by 3 hours and 40 minutes. So that was a huge accomplishment. I was super happy with it and satisfied with just like my consistency throughout the entire race. It's expected that you're going to slow down a little bit in the second half of 100, but I thought that starting the race in 8:40 and coming back in 10:57 was still like pretty impressive. I guess the last thing to note is just the future. I'm going to do will I do another concrete loop race again? I told myself no after the race because, I just didn't really enjoy the scenery, the concrete, or frankly, I just didn't have like a lot of fun, it felt like. There were like a lot of fun moments, but I just felt like I grew kind of bored on the course, which is why I listened to so much music. That's why I was so reliant on it. In the future, I think, I would say I'm like more open to the idea of doing a flat race again, but I would prefer it be on like trail or like gravel road, something like Tunnel Hill or Prairie Spirit as opposed to like the concrete of Jackpot again. With that said, it feels like, for all of us, we finish races and we're like, never again. We all have short memories. I am the same. I always lie to myself, and realistically, like, there's a good chance I'm going to find myself at the start line of Jackpot again or another Jackpot-like event again. So just going to be honest and say it now. I've learned my lesson saying I'm never going to do something again too many times. It is what it is at this point, Oh yeah, and I almost forgot to mention it just for anyone who is listening, but here's the belt buckle for anyone who is watching on YouTube. So pretty cool. And then, a few weeks after the race, I got a package in the mail from Aravaipa, and I thought I'd show this off. I wasn't in the USATF 100 mile. I was in the short course that was non-USATF. I guess I got third in that division, so they sent me this really nice, like, wooden carved third place trophy thing. It's pretty cool. I'll probably put this in the background while I'm doing podcasts. I don't really feel like I deserved a third place award since I wasn't in the USATF division. I just didn't want to pay the extra $70 or $80 to do that. I didn't really see a purpose, but I thought I'd show off those two cool awards. So here they are. It was very well put on event. If you're looking for a fast 100-mile course, I definitely recommend running Jackpot. It was a good experience, and that's all I got. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen to today's episode. I hope you were able to come away with valuable information that can help you run farther, fuel smarter, and develop character through trail and ultra running. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do remember to like, rate, and subscribe to the show. I'd really appreciate it. Also, if you or anyone you know is looking for a registered dietitian or a coach to help you crush your goals in 2026, you can reach out to me directly at journeyrunningllc@gmail.com or through my website, which is journeyruncoaching.com. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.